I got home at 11 o'clock in the morning. The air conditioning in my building had gone out, so I usually ride my bike to work, a 4-mile trip each way. This day, I did just that. The ride back home was quiet. Not that I was aiming for silence, but it turned out that way. I pulled into the backyard a little earlier than usual. My wife, Nell, was sitting on the patio in a shift dress and bare feet. Nothing unusual about that. Our neighbor, Blake Downing, was also sitting there, dressed in gym shorts and a tight t-shirt. That was unusual. There was a beer on the table in front of them. They sat next to each other on a double swing, barely any space between them. When I first saw them, they were facing each other, and Blake had his hand on her shoulder. They didn't notice me for probably 3 seconds. I didn't stop where I usually parked my bike. Instead, I rolled it right out onto the terrace. That's when they noticed me. Nell looked confused and asked, "Bobby?" Blake quickly jumped off the swing, his face showing concern. Blake was an imposing man. 5 feet 10 inches tall, slender, with red hair, though he now shaved his head after losing it at 42 years old. He had been away from soccer for a few years after suffering a shattered knee. Scars were visible on his left leg. He moved to our area the year before and started teaching self-defense classes at the local YMCA. I had watched some of them but never participated. A few years prior, I had trained in hand-to-hand combat myself. Now, in my 40s, I still practiced it, though I wasn't fond of Blake's teaching style. He had a tendency to be self-aggrandizing in his classes. He ran 1 class for men, 2 for women, and 1 mixed class. Nell taught the women's class and once asked me if I wanted to join the mixed class with her. I turned her down, mostly because I knew I could take Blake down. Even though I was 4 inches shorter and 35 pounds lighter, the problem was Blake would make sure to prove himself, and since there would be women present, he'd likely overreact. There could easily have been a real fight, and I wasn't sure who would come out on top. Stop! If you love your parents, then like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you didn't like the video or subscribe to the channel, it means you don't love them. If you don't love them, then write hate in the comments. Continue. Now, as I moved farther from my usual spot, I could feel the tension. I said, "Why don't you get me a beer? I'll be right down." I leaned my bike against a tree and jogged inside, passing both of them. I went upstairs, walked over to my small gun safe, and pulled out a baby Browning .25 semi-automatic pistol. I loaded it by putting 1 round in the chamber. After that, I changed into a new pair of shorts and a loose, long t-shirt. I slipped the gun into my side pocket and jogged back downstairs. They were still sitting across from each other. Nell remained in the double swing. I noticed a 3rd can of beer on the table, an unopened one. I didn't bother to sit down. The 2 of them were still uneasy. I simply said, "The air conditioning went out in the office." That's all I said. Over the years, I've learned that it's better to let others start a conversation that might be uncomfortable. So I looked at each of them for an extended period. Neither of them spoke, and I realized they were facing a dilemma. They could either address the elephant in the room, the one they seemed to be making out when I arrived, or they could try to ignore it. Finally, Nell spoke up. "We were just talking about self-defense classes, Bobby." I replied, "Oh?" Because it seemed to me there was a lot more going on, or about to happen. "What do you think, Blake?" Blake paused before answering. "I think I should leave." "Why were you even here, Blake?" I asked. He said, "I don't want to get involved, Bob." "Well, I think that says it all, don't you? Your boyfriend doesn't want to discuss what was going on when I got home." Nell lowered her eyes. She said softly, "He's not my boyfriend, Bobby." "No, you were just about to kiss him when I arrived. I saw what I saw. It's useless to deny it, so maybe I need some kind of explanation." Blake became enraged. He spat out, "So what if we were going to kiss?" She wanted it, and so did I. I looked at Nell. "Really? I'm sorry. You know that class of his, he's so much stronger and bigger than the ones she's used to, so there's nothing you can do about it." Nell snapped, "Blake, shut up. We made a mistake, and now we won't do it again." "Why not?" Blake challenged. "Bobby isn't doing a damn thing here. None of the husbands do a damn thing. They're all wimps." I wondered briefly how Blake still lived with that attitude. "You need to leave right now, Blake," I said firmly. Blake looked at me, then turned to Nell. "I'm invited, right?" "No," she replied. "You're not invited." "Well, go on then," I said, pointing to the gate. "He lives at the end of the street. And don't come back." Blake stood 12 feet away, then had to walk past me to get to the gate. I reached into my pocket but didn't pull out my gun. I stepped back slightly to let him pass. He hesitated. I could see the indecision on his face. I pulled my hand out of my pocket, letting the gun dangle by my side. Blake stared at me. "Coward," he said. "Take the gun out." Nell shouted. "Just walk away, Blake. He'll shoot you." His face turned as red as his hair. "He's not going to shoot anyone." But he walked toward the gate anyway, moving slowly, glancing over his shoulder. I was tired of all of this. Time to get it over with. I took the magazine out of the gun and shook the round out of the chamber, tossing everything on the ground behind me. I moved toward Blake, but not quickly. He smiled and squared off, waiting for me. Nell was yelling something, but neither of us cared. I kept walking straight at him, arms out in front of me. When I was within range, Blake threw a right-handed punch to my head. It was quick, hard, but I wasn't there when he should have hit me. Instead, I struck him in the neck, hitting his carotid artery. The blow slowed him down, and he was stunned. Blake wasn't used to real combat, but I was. I hit him in the ribs with my left, then followed up with a right to his kidney as he turned away. He went down, wheezing. He tried to roll away, but I chased him. When he got up, I kicked him in the ass. I figured a kick in the ass was appropriate. He went down again but quickly got back up. He didn't look back as he jogged off. I watched him disappear around the corner of the house, then followed him at a distance. I saw him reach the street and turn toward his house. I turned around and jogged back to the patio, where Nell was frozen in some strange pose, holding her neck with her right hand. I walked past her, drew my gun, reloaded it, and picked up the spent shell casing. She turned to look at me, but I didn't stop. I picked up my beer and went into the house to take a shower. I figured she could follow Blake into his house and comfort him if she really needed him. When I got out of the shower, she was sitting on our bed. Just as I was about to push her off the bed hard, I heard a noise. Someone was coming up the stairs. I drew my .32 caliber pistol. Blake appeared in the doorway, pointing a black pistol at me, holding it sideways like in some movie. I shot him in the head just as he fired a round. Later, I discovered that his shot had hit the wall at floor level. Blake went down permanently. There was only a small hole left in his bald head. But he was dead. Nell started screaming. I picked up the landline and dialed 911.